Hi everyone, we'll get started in just a minute. Hi everyone, I'm Kate from General Assembly. Welcome to today's webinar, Elevating Customer Experiences with Applied Design Thinking as part of the 2030 movement. Before we commence today's event, General Assembly Australia would like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the land, where we live, learn, work, and pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Now to introduce General Assembly. We are a global tech education company helping people upskill in business, data, and design. And our mission is to empower people to pursue the work that they love. You can visit us online at ga.co to check out all of our offerings, from classes and workshops to longer format courses and other events like this, currently all running live and online. Thanks for joining us, and a big thank you for Jacqueline Ding for collaborating with us on this event. A big thank you to all of the other partners and speakers who have made this 2030 movement possible. Before we begin, I'm just going to run through some housekeeping information with you. For this webinar, attendees are muted and have no videos, so don't worry if you can't see yourself. To participate in the webinar today, I'd like to point you down to the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see two functions, the chat box and the Q&A. If you have any content-related questions for the presenters, please only ask those in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of the session. This is so we can have all our questions in the one place and we don't miss any. If you have any troubleshooting issues, GA-related inquiries, or any other comments you'd like to make on today's event, please pop those in the chat and our team will follow up with you if necessary. A recording of this webinar will also be sent out by the end of the week. And if you enjoyed today's session, please make sure you check out other events we have lined up for today, such as Man vs. Machine, the ethics of cybersecurity. The rest of this week is also full of exciting events, so make sure you have a look at the 2030 Movement website. As a special thank you, we'd like to offer everyone a 30% off their next workshop at GA with the code 2030 ready. And lastly, it would just be wonderful if everyone could take a few minutes after the webinar today to fill out the feedback form, which I'll post in the chat. And without further ado, I'll now pass on to Jacqueline. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. So nice to presenting this 2-hour workshop. It's going to be jam-packed. I'm going to share my screen. Just 1 second. Okay, I think we are at the right screen. Okay, let me know if you can see the screen. Let's type into chat box when you're ready. 1 second, I'm just gonna, everyone. Okay, still trying to figure out Zoom. There we go, we have some chat happening. So let's be friends with this chat box, because that's the only place I can see you communicating to each other, which is gonna be great. And also, as Kate mentioned, so everyone, if you have a look at the bottom of the Zoom screen, or well, somewhere the Zoom toolbar, there is a Q&A button, and that's where you're going to put your questions in there throughout the workshop. And I will get to these questions at the end of the workshop today. And if I can't get through every question, I'll be answering the most shared questions, most commonly asked question, if you will, on my LinkedIn channel so that everyone can see. So please feel free to pop in any question you have throughout the entire workshop. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you guys are introducing yourselves. Fantastic. And also just like, yeah, let's just talk about why you're here today and why, what are you looking forward to in this, what are you looking forward to, you know, hear about or chat about from this workshop. There's a lot of like people from Singapore and India. Fantastic. Nice to meet you all. I can't see you guys, but oh well. We'll say hi to each other somewhere else. All right, hi from France. How exciting. And London, oh, from all over the world. Great. Okay, because we do have like quite a heavy session to go through today. There's a lot of great information, and I'm also going to share some of my work in progress examples, so you can see from some of my real projects of what the process is like. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so I want to hear from you guys if how familiar you are with the idea of design thinking. Are you new to it? Have you done it with your team? Or have you been practicing it for a while now? You're just looking for new ideas. New to it, it's great, fantastic. I just want to make sure that I focus on what the majority of what you guys are here for so that I could. Fantastic, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay, cool. So we have a mix of majority of it are new, which is great. I have, enough information to introduce what design thinking is. It might take a while for you guys to get used to, but for those of you who's already been doing it and know about this, perhaps I will share some of the existing examples of my work in progress documents, etc., with you guys so that you can see and we can exchange ideas. All right. Let's get going. Okay, so my name is Jacqueline, and I have been around for a while, I guess. So I started as a graphic textile designer probably like 15 years ago. Oh my gosh. And then traveled around the world a little and did branding design and interactive design. I mean, that was, I remember that was like when the whole WordPress became such a thing, and I was doing a lot of interactive design at the time, and also content strategy, which is still surprisingly a relatively new area at the moment. So, and I came back to Sydney, and I've been working across creative agencies as well as media agencies, sort of just tipping my toes around different environments to help them with like branding or social strategies, or even sometimes environmental design and event creative directions. And about 7 to 8 years ago, I guess since 10 years ago, that's when the first iPhone came out, and at the time when every single company needed a new app. And that's when I sort of like naturally stepped into product design and doing a lot of user experience and sort of product strategies. And now I do a lot less hands-on work, and but instead I have immense amount of like satisfaction through sharing my ideas and also mentoring teams in different companies, etc. Yeah. Okay, so let's go through the big goals of today. I just want to make sure that we tick off these things. Design thinking methodology and why apply design thinking to business is essential today. And I want to share customer-centric methods. For those of you who are familiar with design thinking, we all know that user-centered is the ultimate idea for design thinking. So there are a couple of methods that we have to apply throughout every project, whether if you're, it doesn't matter what kind of project that you're working on, you could actually utilize design thinking methods such as, for example, if you're in the HR department and you want to, if you realize that the entire company is feeling really unmotivated, filling in annual reviews, for example, you may be able to apply design thinking methods to come up with like a prototype, a new method or new process for the annual reviews. Or if you're designing a new product or new features in an existing product, every single different scenario, you can actually utilize the design thinking. And lastly, mapping out opportunities to improve customer experience. And this is where I like the most, because that's got to do a lot with, it's more than just research. It's about strategies. It's about how to think between users and business insights and aligning technology, business and users together. So yeah, that's the big goals of today. I'm excited. Right. First things first, what is design thinking? Okay. Design thinking is both an ideology and a set of adaptable tools concerned with solving complex problems by putting the users first. Okay, so the entire 2 hours today, we're going to talk about how to understand our users and how do we use those insights that we find out about our users and implement it into business strategies and steps. So design, the word design, many years ago, I remember because back in the day, probably more like 12, 13 years ago, when people think about design, they always think about just making things look good. I mean, if I hear that phrase one more time, I'm probably gonna kill myself. But design is definitely more than making things look good. Don't you all agree? It's about making it better for human beings, generally. It's about making a better system. It's about saving time, being innovative. It works well. It's simple. And it makes me feel good about myself. It's so much more than just making things feel good. And so anyone who's working with designers, I mean, as a designer, I can empathize that making things look good is definitely not the best way to describe design. But I also would like everyone else who's potentially briefing designers or working with designers to understand that design comes from many aspects of thinking. And then often the word design means we have to think on the user's perspective, from the user's perspective, in order to make better decisions for the business. So it's not just making things look good. And people are increasingly, when I say people, I mean everyone, customers, users, increasingly seeking out products, services, and organizations that they personally connect with on a meaningful level. And I constantly use this metaphor is that everything that we design for example, services, how does it make you feel when you walk into a bank, for example? How does it make you feel when I launch on your website and look at your landing page? All of these as different aspects of customer touch points, it's almost similar if you consider it on the day-to-day level. If we were, let's say, going to our friend's house for the first time, and they make you feel really welcome, and they'll make you a cup of tea, prepare all of these like delicious cookies and desserts to make you feel comfortable as a guest. I often would reflect any product or service as if it's a human. So the more you do that, the more you're trying to do that, the better it is we can actually envision our business and all our services is actually just another human talking to our user. So in 2008, when the first iPhone came out, it's like, okay, cool. That's completely different. Okay. It's not just working well. It looks great. It feels great. And all of a sudden I actually am cool because I've got one of this. It's a status symbol. And everyone is probably all familiar with this little bouncy elastic motion on iPhone. And there's a little story behind it, right? So Apple obviously is a company that constantly invests heavily into designing every single aspect of their product to reflect as human as possible. So this little elastic motion, when you get to experience that interacting with your phone, instantly your brain is telling you right now that you have reached to the top and there's nothing else above A, the letter A, right? So Apple actually spent 9 months working on this little movement. Why? Because they value the importance of this little bouncing movement. It's going to become a language. And this language, it's without actually saying anything, it's indicating, it's as if the phone is talking to us, like you've reached the top, there's nothing there's nothing about this. So ever since then, iOS has actually trademarked this little movement. And if you're using Android phone and trying to scroll to the top, you'll probably notice it's a completely different interaction. Android phone most of the time. Well, I'm using a Google phone. So like when I scroll to the top, it has a little tiny little airy little pop-up says you've reached the top or there's no more information above. So I want you guys to start observing every single movement on the product that you interact with or service that you interact with intention and with integrity. And just keep thinking about why does those designers design it in such way? If the product is not actually talking to me, how is this little movement, how these little things make the user feel? And all of these interaction movements are all really important, right? So design thinking is actually undeniably the most powerful tool for many companies. It is a mindset, really. It's like Airbnb, for example. It's the idea starting from the founder, Brian can't remember his last name. He's actually started at this, I think it was an event in San Francisco when he couldn't find like affordable hotels, and he stayed at his friend's living room, and suddenly the idea of Airbnb came out. So it's about, react quickly into the situation that you're experiencing and coming up with multiple ideas to make it work. And also, if you think about it, ever since like for example, Facebook or Airbnb, these are all startup ideas or started from very young entrepreneurs, probably or starting from their parents' garage with minimal or zero budgets, right? So that is actually one of the mindset of design thinking. It's that they are not afraid to fail. They are willing to try different ideas and not afraid to fail. And they probably tried so many times so fast, failed so fast in order to get to the ultimate result. And this is one of the most critical thinking mindsets large enterprises or company lack of, because they're too comfortable into that waterfall thinking method that they've been doing year on year. They don't really know how to change to a quick failing model. When I say quick failing model, it's actually quite playful, and it's actually quite encouraging as a team to work together. And I'll show you how throughout the presentation. Right, so I did this real simple graphic representation of what traditional thinking versus the new design thinking looks like, right? So traditional thinking, when any business decide what they want to do, often they would go through maybe financial department, think about what the budget looks like for Q1, Q2, and they probably go through the marketing department to go, okay, how much does SEO cost or whatever. And then they finally probably go through design and development and push out the product. And then the user is like, oh, well, I'm not quite sure if this fits my needs. So design thinking is all about shifting the user to the very beginning of the spectrum. From any decision making, you're always making sure you're reflecting back to what the user wants and needs. So it is basically about shifting that whole process. So here are a couple of examples. Firefox. Millions of users visit the support site of Mozilla Firefox every single year, but many of them turns into questions asked on the support forum, right? So they did spend about 9 weeks of iteration, design, and user testings, and Mozilla has since then reduced support question by 70%. 70%. I mean, if you think about that as a number, as a data, how is that not a powerful number to reflect how much man hour and budget you have saved for the company down the road? Not to mention about opportunity costs during that whole time. So that's the power of design thinking. It's about quickly spotting what's going wrong with the product or service and quickly test the idea with new possibilities and new ideas with the team and prototype it quickly in order to achieve the ultimate goal. The loop. IBM, this is actually a free documentary on Envision. IBM has the entire documentary is all about how IBM has utilized design thinking, which they call the loop, to turn around the entire company culture and increase their productivity and to achieve a 300% ROI. So that is extremely powerful. Deluxe pen, we all know deluxe pen, and design thinking is definitely, this is another way of reflecting. It's not about digital product, it's about every single type of product or service out there that you can use design thinking to solve a problem of what will my wall looks like when the paint dries. So this is probably one of the questions that customers will call up the store and go, but I don't know what the paint color is going to look like on my wall, right? So they probably documented this in the customer service portal and then turned around and go, how might we help the customer solve that problem or help them answer that question correctly? So they did user research, journey mapping, usability testings. All of these are all part of design thinking methods, the user testing methods. They created the app, and the app actually increased the tester pen sales by 65% and stock is searched by 92%. Again, what's really powerful is if we can really try to think about how all of our design decision is reflecting to business metrics. This is when we can make real change in our organization, in the company, and the way we work. So we have to challenge the mindset. Even though I can't see everyone, but I'm going to challenge everyone to do this with me. So we're going to dig out a piece of paper. I have this like tiny little business card. So I'm going to just use this business card. We're going to draw a sunset, and then 15 seconds, and I'm going to go stop, and you go stop. Okay, go. And 15 seconds. Done. Okay. And I'm just going to show you, oh my God, like, oh no, my virtual background is not really allowing me to do so. But I would like you to type in the chat a thumbs up or yes if you have at least 3 of these elements on your little drawing. This is one of the best little exercise you could do with your team if they don't believe in design thinking, and that this is like one of the ways to change the way they think about things. Fantastic. There is so much, like this is with 15 seconds, this is what shows all of us as human beings. Oh, horizon and have sun, interesting. Yeah, so it's interesting to show like high percentage of human beings, they think about the same way when we were giving a very generic brief or an idea. So the next, I've got another second little challenge for you guys. The second challenge is 20 seconds and draw a sunset you last saw. Okay, go. All right, 20 seconds is up. And I understand that we can't really see each other's drawing, but if you do this with your team, whether it's via Zoom or a real life meeting room, you're going to be really interested to see the differences, creativity that people put on that piece of paper with 20 seconds of allowance, only because we've got given a slightly different context to the brief. So this challenge actually shows us when we were giving a very common and generic context, every single one of us, or majority of us, I would say probably 90%, or every single time I do this test, at least 90% of us all go to very common and generic places. We all have the same idea. And because we're familiar with how it looks, how that appears to us. Now, if we change that phrase or the brief in a slightly different context, we all unlock a much broader and diverse range of ideas. And what does that mean? It means if we keep doing things the old way, we're often going to end up with the same repeated pattern, same repeated result. How about if we just change it up a little bit of different context at a time with a slight different brief, and you're suddenly going to see your entire team unlock much broader ideas and creativity. And it's actually really exciting because one, you're not only getting out so much better ideas, and two, you're going to see the team, like the whole energy of the team rises up because everyone is feeling like they're getting more creative, and feeling a little bit more free to coming up with ideas because you were encouraged to. So this is actually a really cool reflection of how we should see design thinking in the actual practical practice. So it is an experimental mindset. Just come up with different brief and let your team to go different directions for a little bit, and maybe for a couple of days, and then we all regroup again, and then discuss which idea has better opportunities, for example. And it is always optimistic. There's no right or wrong, and there are tons of ideation techniques out there that actually can cut your traditional meeting times in half in order to get to more ideas and better ideas and make a better decision at the end of it. And I will take you through some of those, one or two of those examples later through the deck. Okay, so first of all, you want to make sure that you create the space, right? You want to make sure that your team feels comfortable and encouraged to have that's okay to fail mindset. It's okay, it's not perfect mindset. I mean, the honest truth is that I've been doing design for like this many years, but I suck at drawing. My sunset drawing looks shit, and it's probably like your drawing is a lot better than mine. So it's okay to let them think like that. No one should be good at everything, right? And the second thing, making sure the whole team is connected and sharing that same vision of where you see this is going. And making sure your environment allows that expansion and change as well. And lastly, all of these combined together, you're going to see the entire team's energy shift. And this takes time, not going to lie. But here are some old habits to break. And I think it really requires, if there's one or two advocates in each team, to really stick and making sure that we are all reflecting on each other's energy. And we just pointed out, not being mean, but like going, okay, you just jump straight into the solution mode. Let's don't jump straight into the solution mode. Let's expand ideas first rather than a solution mode. Overthinkers and naysayers are often, they are, they're good. They're precise thinker, logical thinker a lot of the time. But these type of thinkers potentially is good when we are trying to narrow down the idea rather than trying to expand and get a lot of ideas at the beginning. So it's about how we utilize the energy in the team in the best possible way to come up with the best result. Try not to be a perfectionist. I'm massively guilty for that one. The groupthink scenario means if we put questions out there and then everyone in the meeting room sort of getting influenced by potentially one of the team member that's slightly more active speaker than the rest of them, and the rest of them because they don't feel comfortable speaking out their mind, they often just go, yeah, I agree, yeah, I agree, because that's easier. So this is the groupthink scenario. If you see this is the groupthink scenario, trying to break out your meetings next time, trying to be a bit more observant, and trying to set it up a little bit differently and see what you get from it. Okay, so here is another little Q&A. So Sarah, let's say Sarah wants to start a company, right? So she's got, okay, I've got this idea. I want to start a company. And here is all of the questions that Sarah is possibly asking. And I'm not joking. I've helped so many startup founders setting up their branding or website, and all of them, they all ask this kind of question. So how much does the logo cost? How much does it cost if I want to make an app? Da, 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 da. But what question do you think Sarah should be asking now? Let's all share what your thoughts are. What question should be Sarah asking now? Yes, Grace. Who are the users? What will make my customer happy, and who are they? Yes, you guys already got it. And most importantly, what value can I create for my users? What value? What can I give it to them? So this is the difference between product-centric thinking method traditionally versus customer-centric method. These are the questions that they often ask, right? And I'm sure all of us are familiar with this if we're working in especially at enterprise level or government agencies. How can we make the most amount of money from our customers? They often look at the achievement by numbers before achievement by satisfying the customer, whereas they should be asking, what can we add the most value to our users? They ask, how can we reach our target during this financial year? Versus how can we help our users reach their targets? Hallelujah, somebody. Yeah, so all of those questions are actually, it's about shifting the little question at the beginning. Remember that little sunset challenge that we did? By shifting the question, all of a sudden you're encouraging the entire company to shift the thinking into not just me, but them. We want to serve them, and suddenly the entire company becomes selfless, and the conversation becomes so much more fluid and user-focused. And trust me, if you're trying to focus your attention on how to make the user's life a little bit better, everything else would just suddenly fall in places magically. So there is this saying that I have saw coming around, and it's like, immature companies, they're trying so hard to want the users to understand their product, but instead they refuse to understand their users, which is a little sad because they would spend so much money which can be saved. So on that note, let's talk about the cost of not being user-centered. So this is a little research I found. 75% of organizations think that they're actually customer-centric, whereas only 30% of customers believe that this is the case. So if we look at the empathy gap, how much product opportunity is there being missed every single time, every single year? And there is many reasons to cause that, right? And I have worked or consulted many companies that they claim to be super customer-centric, but it's either these reasons below. It's either not enough user research is being implemented or none at all. So they are all by looking at looking at competitors' products, customer metric, or they've been looking at the overall Google Analytics, like the overall big number, but they refuse to actually speak to users on the human level. They may be not involving the right people in their user research. So, for example, there's this one company I worked at. They have management, and usually the management talks to the users like a familiar user group that they've been talking to all the time. So AKA maybe management from other companies. So then there is this implement team, which includes designers and strategists, and they would pass on the information. The management team would pass on the information to the implement team and says our user wants this, our user wants that. And I'm like, okay, is there any video recordings? Is there any synthesized research? Is there any reports that we've done? By just talking to user and translating this information, secondhand information, which often are being translated with a little bit of objectiveness in it, it's not going to help everyone get on the same page of user-centered. That is not user-centered approach. So research data are not being utilized in its full potential. That's another way. the art of synthesizing data into action points is actually a lot more complicated than most of us think. So let's dive deep into it later after this bit. So customer service experience is proven to be the main opportunity to differentiate competitors, beating out product qualities and competitive pricing even. So actually, this little data here is interesting, right? So it is actually much more expensive to acquire new customer than to keep existing customer. Therefore, our focus, if you have a product already, you should be focusing the experience on improving the experience for existing customers. And then those existing customers, if they're having a great experience, they may become the advocate of your product. So that's quite interesting. So when we say user-centered, what does it mean? Like, we want to hear from them exactly what they say about if this product actually suits their needs, if that product is going to make them feel good, or do I even need this thing? Do I already have something that works fine, and etc. So utilizing different user research methods, these are the overall touch points that you could potentially look at from interviewing or from observing. And there's so many different research. Yes, and I believe this PDF will be sent out to everybody later. So don't worry about taking notes. You will get the PDFs. And so user tests actually improve your overall brand and product values. So how much should I budget for it? So here's a little data, and I've included a little link here for you to have a look, especially for you, those of you are looking into. The big question is like, how do I get the stakeholders on board? Okay, the best thing you can get a stakeholder on board is proven how little effort it takes to get user feedbacks and how much it's going to reflect on business values. So Nelson Norman Group, this is one of my favorite research destination for user experience or customer experience in general. They've collected data from 863 projects, and usability costs were between 8% and 13% of the project budget, meaning if the usability didn't do well, it actually costed that much. And then they concluded the current best practice call for devoting about 10% of a project's budget to usability. And of course, this is a generic number, and you will have to sort of somehow adjust accordingly. But there's always ways to stick with a low budget if your product or service is targeted for not a specific user group. So if your product and service is targeted for a specific user group, the budget will be significantly higher. For example, doctors or CEOs, that type of user groups often require a much higher budget and potentially a user agency to help you source this type of users. Okay, so this is a magic number I would love you guys to remember. This magic number is 1, 5, 10. And what does that mean? $1 spent in research equals $5 spent during the design phase and equals $10 spent during the development phase. So this is again another study found from Nelson Norman Group, and I am a huge believer in this, because if you don't spend money in research, how do you do the design? You will just be hypothetically designing everything, and not to mention about the development cost if it wasn't validated well. So this is the number I believe every single stakeholder should know. It's quite simple. They can measure it up. Okay, so everyone looks fine. Cool. Design thinking approach. Woo-woo. Okay, so this is interesting because just before this little workshop, I'm working with a group of junior product design, sort of UX designers as well. And a lot of them, as I were guiding through how they should approach a problem, approach a solution, they are going through that transition between the traditional thinking tradition to the design thinking tradition. So traditional thinking, they were often being briefed with like a heavy brief from stakeholders going like, this is, I want it this way, I want it that way. But design thinking is about asking the right question and go, why do we need to stick with this brief? Does this brief even make sense? Did we even reflect these intentions with what the user wants, etc.? So it's about those tiny little traditional thinkings that we are used to, and then if we pay more attention to our day-to-day work, we could easily pinpoint out what needs to be changed or like upgraded a little bit maybe. Most importantly, management makes the decision going into collaborative team and users. So you will find the whole productivity of the team increases dramatically if we are being user focused, because none of us is like all of us suddenly our boss is the user, not the management team. And that feels great because all of us suddenly has this one focal point and not trying to please someone that doesn't even turn, like pleasing a user is actually one thing that you need to focus on, because without that, there's no needle is going to be turned for the business. So yeah, let's encourage everyone to fail fast, fail often. All right, so principles, the human rule, we've already spoken about this repeatedly. It's always about users. It's always about like between people and between how they react and how they think. Now, the ambiguity route is about experiment and fail fast. This number 3 point is really important, okay? All design is redesign. While technology and social circumstances may change, basic human needs remain unchanged. So the way how we feel about happiness, encouraged, surprised, those little feelings, we have been motivated, things that motivated us with those feelings hasn't changed. When we, like for example, if spring's here and I'm smelling the flower, and that smelling the flower, that pleasantness hasn't changed since human race. So if we can remember this, it will make us design experience a lot better and to better suit users' needs. Tangibility rule, prototype, and make sure that it's again that idea of fail fast. If you prototype quickly or on a piece of paper, just drawing it out or something, it's like kind of like, oh, it's just a piece of paper, I can just throw it away, it's okay, instead of like stuck into it and trying to make this perfect. It's about quickly coming up with something and let that whole creative movement rotate. Okay, so here are the 5 different phases for design thinking. And one thing I have to really mention is, depending on which project, this process does not need to be in a linear format. It's not a linear process. Meaning, if you have a problem in the business or challenges, whatever, you may come in and go, okay, well, actually, I'm going to do quick testing of the existing website first. So then from testing, I can get insights from the users, and then I'm going to prototype something or ideate something and then prototype, and then I'll just stick with these couple of like different steps. Or if you feel that the business model isn't working, and you may want to speak to the user first and redefine the user model and keep doing those 2 steps until the user is like agreeing with your business model, then you prototype website or branding. So it really depending on what kind of project, but here are the 5 different steps for you to use, and these are all steps in your toolbox. So these 5 steps traditionally gets applied to what we call this double diamond framework, which is one of the most most frequently used, I would say, design thinking framework for many projects that I've been working on. So the phase one is about designing the right thing in this little diamond shape thingy. And as you can see, I've put the different phases of these steps in the spot of where the diamond is to indicate where it happens. And the phase two is about designing the things right. So phase one, you are spending a lot of time doing research and defining the problem. When you are sure about the problem that's correctly defined, then you go ahead and ideate and then come up with lots of ideas, then prototype test. And then over time, you are going to do this double diamond over and over again. And then it sort of narrows down the scope of your work down to sort of like a pinpointed solution. Okay, so here is what the mindset needs to happen at every single different phase during these double diamond phases. The first mindset right here is divergent thinking. And this is really important, guys, because if you are during the divergent thinking stage, if you let the team go completely wild, let them just research in every single direction possible, everything, and not stopping them. Don't even talk about budget here. Don't even talk about, we can't do this or we can't do that. That's not the time for it. The time for it is potentially when we are getting into the problem defined or prototyping stage. So just to remember, when it's divergent state, encourage your team to go as wide as possible, right? Which is why these little arrows comes wide, going wide. And then when you get a lot of ideas and a lot of research down, that's when we're coming down to convergent thinking. It's when we filtering out the research into what kind of insights we can get out from this lot of research. And from the insights, what kind of ideas can we go wide with? And that's about coming up with so many different ideas. And then voting the ideas down to get to the convergence state and go, okay, here are the two ideas that we think that's the most valid idea to go ahead, because that measures up with the problem statement and user research that we found. Let's go ahead and test those two ideas. This is the generic, this overall sort of overview, I would say, for the double diamond framework. And these are the questions you should be asked, like this is the conversation happening at different stage, right? What's the problem the user's experiencing? Is anyone else that's perhaps already having some sort of solution for this particular problem? Or how does everyone solve that particular problem? So you may be looking into competitive research, lots of user research surveys, Facebook groups, Reddit. There are so many different ways to look into what are people talking about if they have that particular problem. Now that you've learned the needs of problems, how do you interpret it? This is about getting the insights. And then from the insights, okay, from the between problem, the define stage to ideate stage, this bit in the middle is actually arguably one of the most important part, because if we get this part right, our ideation action points can be a lot more on point, I should say. Yeah, so that at the ideation point, there are so many different techniques as well for the entire team to come up with so many different ideas. And it's about, again, no budget at this stage. It's about, creating different options. And then from there on, we might have getting the team all together and go, how do we evolve this part and make it better? Let's prototype from selected 2 to 3 ideas. And then we test 2 to 3 ideas until one that's most resonated with the user. So it's about team, really. With design thinking, teams can work much more efficient because they are staying aligned. Obviously, now that, as I mentioned, the user is the focal point, and it will become the centralized vision if we're being user-focused. Keeping people at the center of their work, and it's a proven way to better solutions faster. Better solutions faster. It takes practice, though. I'm not gonna lie. It's easier said than done. It's about like just become advocate for this. Let's quickly get some ideas out there and let's quickly communicate and define what's the best solution as a team, rather than just stuck behind a computer and go, I don't know what to do. That's never going to be productive. Right. So success always starts from understanding customer needs and the opportunities. So here we want to focus on two main process to find out what exactly the user needs and how do we get the opportunity from it. Most typically is customer journey. And of course, in order to correct customer journey, you need to have user interviews or user research beforehand. Right. So we cannot think about solutions until we understand the problem. And so who has that problem? The users. Yay. And of course, review the organization objective as well. And this is coming from, different, it's different questions depending on what kind of challenge that you're facing. If you are working at a company and has business challenge, then, write down all the business challenges. Why are my existing customers drop off? What are their feedbacks? Sometimes if I work with a product that's existing product and they have a problem, the first people that I talk to is the customer service team. And I want to make sure that the customer service team is documenting every single customer feedback in the most productive way. So then I'm looking at those feedbacks on a weekly basis in order to make sure that I apply design changes or strategic solutions real time to the customer's feedback. And I also want the customer team to go, don't translate this, just literally quote it directly from the user's mouth. Like, I can't make this work. I can't pay for this. There is, whatever. Just let's use like first person instead of trying to translate it into like the customer that can't seem to make it work. I actually wanted to hear it from a customer's mouth. So there are different questions that you need to be asking depending on your situation. And I mean, let's just say if you are not considering this on for like a company or enterprise level, and you wanted to utilize this method for yourself, you can use that as well. For example, okay, I spend too much time making my breakfast or get ready in the morning. Then you go, okay, why? I'm going to try to figure out what's the most important in the morning, and why does it take me so long to get ready or something, and you can apply this design thinking and prototype different strategies in your own life and between you and your partner, all of it. Great. So let's set a goal for the business. Let's say I'm going to use this example, right? I'm going to take you guys through like a little mini example. Actually, before we do that, I think we could all do a little break, like 5 minutes. Is that cool? Because I don't want to take you guys through this entire thing. It will take another hour, and then all of us probably be like, oh my God, I'm yawning. Okay, 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back to this. 5 minutes. 5 minutes starts from now. Go to toilet. Okay. Okay, is everyone back? Send a holla in the chat if you're back. Yay. Awesome. Okay, I'm back too. Let's jump right into it. Cool. Let's say we have a school, right? A school of art, and they run live drawing classes. And the school has a goal. It's saying, okay, we want to increase student. We want to, I was just like making sure that I'm actually sharing screen. We want to increase our student experiences by understanding how they experience an in-person class. So let's say, okay, so this is pretty generic. So you go in and go, okay, cool. You go, who are the users, right? So first of all, you need to understand who's coming to the school, who's registering the school. Do they have already done, have they already done some sort of user research in a database? If not, then this is where you want to look into. If there's a demographic, Google Analytics, some sort of survey that you could send out. And at that point, you would potentially set up, you know, just a couple of like, if you can see a pattern of the age group, let's say we have a majority of the age group that's like 20 to 30 years old, and then another spike at 40 years old, then you may want to, you know, have a couple of users in one or one higher percentage of age groups, or you know, cultural groups or whatever, depending on the kind of project that you're working on. So setting up user interviews and looking at Google Analytics 100%. And I mean, in terms of the user interview techniques and in user interview preparations, that type of topic, I could spend another whole day talking about it. There are so much involved in preparing interviews, and it's not hard. It's just there is a lot of different tools in the toolbox that you may potentially want to know, because you want to utilize the best one for that particular scenario. So it's quite free. It's a lot more than just calling the user up and talk to them. You know, there is some do's and don'ts as well, because if you're talking to someone that doesn't know you, it's kind of really important, again, to apply the idea of empathy into every single step and making sure that they're feeling really welcomed. If you're setting up logistically convenient for them, so there's no frustration by the time to get to the interview. I mean, right now we're all doing Zoom interviews now, so it's a lot easier. But you still need to make sure how to observe their reaction and ask the right question at the right time. Yeah, and I think this kind of takes practice and takes a little bit of get out from your comfort zone kind of thing. If you're not traditionally a outspoken person, it's okay, but it's important to be active listening all the time, and trying not to take notes when they're talking to you. Which is why you need to record your interviews. So what I find probably the most direct user research at this point is, number one, survey. But again, survey is not as easy as everyone thinks it is. You need to know what you're doing when it's coming down to survey, because number one, when anyone is completing a survey, they hate to think. So you need to make their life easy and make them don't even need to think, so you can get the most natural reaction from their answers. When that being said, you probably need to figure out what kind of answer they will need in your survey. So if you are sending out a survey with all the open questions with no multiple choice, for example, I can guarantee you like a lot of users is going to drop out and not even finish the survey because it's just too hard. But if you give them multiple choices, it's much easier. And also make sure that you phrase the questions correctly as well. Okay, so once you do all of those kind of interview research, essentially you want to find out who's this person and what's their problem and challenges that they're finding, they're experiencing. What are their goals and how are they currently solving the problem, which is one of the most important things. And other than that, general life lifestyles or experience that's related to the particular problem that you're solving. So for example, if you are designing a redesigning experience for a shopping website, you may want to also ask the question of what other shopping websites that are you using? Is there any other is there any other website that influences your shopping decisions, such as Instagram, or Pinterest, all of that. So those are the type of related questions that you want to ask depending on the problems that you're solving. So this is, if for those of you who's already done design thinking or any type of marketing, this user persona looking thing, this is obviously a very simplified version, shouldn't look any unfamiliar to you, right? So you've probably done this in different stages of your career, and it's about knowing what the right questions to ask so that you can get the most out of your interviews and your feedbacks. Because it's kind of awkward if you have to call them back 3 times and go, oops, I forgot to ask you another question, I want to be organized. Right, so let's say, okay, so cool, we've got Emma who wants to learn art, and she's one of the users from that school of art or the company that we're solving the problem for. So we just really need to get to know Emma's journey. This is her, and that's her goal. She wants to go to art class and she wants to finish the class, right? So what you did there is figure out her personality and what her sort of her basic process is like and challenges is like when experiencing the product or service. And then now you're trying to map it out with the customer journey. So when you're trying to map out a customer journey, what you need to do is figuring out at what touch point this user has to go through in order to complete the goal, right? So for Emma's scenario, so the touch point is a step in the journey where the user interacts with the company and the product, and the channel is the means by which the user does it. So for example, the channel might be Emma register online and she gets an email, and then she logs into the website. That's like email and website, that's 2 different channels. So you want to understand which channel leads Emma to this particular spot. And then you just start to map out exactly what the journey is like. And then the touch point doesn't have to be an actual thing. It could be a process, right? So for example, start a class could be, well, if I'm saying, let's say if it's in a shopping scenario, right? Like me browsing a website, that would be landing page, check out a product page, review page, and then add to cart or something. And these are the little process throughout my journey to get to the final goal. And then you just map out the little touch points there. And then trying to also, these also, of course, all depending on your interview and user research from previous stage. And then at some point you may be thinking, okay, actually, when I interviewed Emma or 5 other students, they found the class really when they're trying to understand the class, they find that they had to do it like again to understand it. So that means they have to go back and do the restudy and redo the class activity or something in order to understand. So that what we call is a edge case, right? So this is the most smooth journey, customer journey. And then there's edge cases that would potentially means you need to design another flow or design another experience to make that better. So mapping out the journey means, okay, so initially we've done the user interviews and all of the little like post-it notes that we've gathered together. We've did the affinity mapping thing with the team. And from here, we, as a team, we want to go, okay, so how does Emma feel and what does she do at every single touch point during the journey? So this is almost a timeline on the top. And so what you do is just filling in the little post-its that you found earlier. Oh, so for example, Emma came into the class and she's completely new, and she's probably asking other students going, are you new here too? And then she's thinking, I don't even know which classroom to go to, or like she's getting distracted by the loud noise and can't focus or something. Like these are factors that makes her feel certain way. And all of these things are answers or observations that you have done during your research, right? So if you have recorded your interview, for example, you may want to look back to the interview and trying to observe. I mean, because sometimes it takes the interviewer sort of it requires you to be super sensitive. So for example, if the user is kind of like having a little bit of like, I'm not quite sure kind of face, you have to go, okay, you don't seem so sure here. What makes you feel this way? To sort of encourage them to say it out loud so that you can get what they're thinking in there out on the piece of post-it notes, right? So pinpoint, maybe she's stressed because of all the above reasons, or she's forgot to bring X, Y, Z because she didn't know that she needed it, that kind of thing. So then you're filling in post-it notes at every single stage. Doing this, it will help you figure out where is the opportunity. And before we get to the opportunity, there's a lot more. So you fill it in. And so after you're filling in Emma's experience, it's time to bring the company's journey into the map. What does it mean? So most business solutions fail because they focus like exclusively on their business needs while completely neglecting the users, right? So it's about us aligning what the business is doing with what the user is experiencing, so we can see where the misalignment is. So let's have a look. So where the opportunity is, you're going to start filling in stuff, attributes such as, what are we as a company doing at this point to welcome new students, for example? What do people like about what we're doing? What do people don't like about it? And if there's any threat, for example, hard to find an address, and it's really hard to find an entrance to the building, that kind of thing. It's all stopping points to make the user feel welcome and comfortable. So you want to do the same thing with affinity points with the customer service team, your team, and don't just have one team, maybe even inviting someone from accounting, someone from dev team to come in and have a little chat about what they think about what's missing. Because it's really about team collaboration here. So at this point, you want to avoid the temptation to go into solution mode. Don't try to go, okay, Emma doesn't know which classroom to go. Why don't we just tell her which classroom to go, like on the invitation or something? Like, trying not to, because there could be, as soon as you go to solution mode, that it's kind of stopping new ideas from happening. So what we want to get to is that ideation stage where everyone in a team can contribute a lot of different ideas. Remember the sunset challenge? That a lot of different sunsets on the second challenge is what we're trying to get to. So you fill in the little activities your company do, and sorry. So then at the end, there's this how might we. So I want you guys to type in the chat box here. Have you done how might we exercise with your team before? Oh my God, I've got spelling mistakes. Thanks, Eva. Yes, how might we? I love, yes, amazing. Okay, so how might we statement, for those who you don't know what how might we that is, let me briefly explain what how might we statement is. How might we questions are short questions that launch brainstorming, right? So it falls out of your problem statements or your user journey mapping or design principles as seeds for your ideation. So this is the sort of moving into ideation stage. What we've done here is we've interviewed the user, we've sort of like put them into categories or themes. And then from there on, we've came out with insights and opportunities where the company's shortfalls, etc. And then we can go, okay, how might we improve certain things? So this is the little process. So how might we statement, it could be, we want to make sure that we keep the how might we statement open. So it's not, if you're saying how might we make the button more obvious, that's not a good how might we, because there's only two solutions to make that better, right? So make it bigger, change the color, change the font or something. That doesn't allow creativity to explode. So you wanted to make sure that your statement is broad enough to allow the whole team to go and sort of think about different strategies. So let's say, how might we ensure the photo references are recent? Or, how might we allow users to prioritize their process? Blah, blah, blah. One of these, how might we could generate lots of different ideas from the team. So as a team, you gather together and you just, one idea per post-it, put it on the wall, and then everyone just writing down their idea. There's no there's no ego here. It's about volumes, right? As much ideas as possible, and there's no stopping. And then as a team, you then vote for which idea that so you could potentially, let's say let's just vote for 3 ideas that you think is your favorite idea. And from voting, you can see there is potentially repeated patterns of the best idea that potentially can go into prototyping. So this is kind of like a speedy way of getting into a solution faster as a team. So all good. With how might we, it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite techniques. Please utilize it. And then, the more you go, how might we, the more the whole team is going to be like, oh, as soon as I hear how might we, that means, it's time for us to go like really wide and get creative. So let's get back to the journey. So how might we make new students feel more welcome on their first day? So based on what Emma is saying here, she's like, I didn't know which classroom to go to. I'm not quite sure, but I'm stressed, that kind of thing. So maybe, she's feeling stressed because it's the first day and it's not very well informed about where to go, etc. She's not prepared. So, or the school is not helping her prepared for the first day. So, which is why, how might we make new students feel more welcome on the first day? And then you guys probably would do like a whole lot of like post-its as a team, and then figure out actually the opportunity is pre-class preparation. So then we have pinpointed out there is one, the journey before the class, before the actual user engaged with the school. It's really important. So then you can go ahead as a whole team to expand the research into pre-class and making sure that we understand the process here is on point to lead to make sure that new students feel better when they arrive on the location on the first day. So that's how you trying to get your figure out where your opportunity is by step on the customer journey. So then what do you do after you do your opportunity and how might we? So at here, where the pre-class part, we might be able to figure out, oh, actually, we haven't done much at a pre-class. There is a lot we can do. So we can then put the statement, how might we statement out there, right? So then advocate the whole team to go, okay, cool. That's where we could potentially improve the customer journey, blah, blah, blah. And at this point, you may be thinking, okay, initially you did it on this white wall and it's like messy but big, great. You may want to somehow digitalize it and then print it out or something. But I would say, try not to spend too much time or money on this. Some company spend way too much money on designing this beautiful wall mural of the user persona, and I'm like, yeah, but the user is like changing, their needs and wants changing all the time. So how do you accommodate that? It's a bit non-productive, maybe. Yeah, so like whatever fidelity that you feel suits your company, and then you can have the entire company probably brainstorm like what we did. We brainstorm and then go, okay, cool. here's the ideas, and then we've voted a couple of the ideas that's the most with the most potential. And what we're going to do is the prioritizing, deciding point of which idea that we're going to prototype. And traditionally speaking, this is a classic process, the impact effort matrix. So where you want to get to is that little square on the top left-hand side with the highest impact and lowest effort. And then action those points first. So someone might came up with the idea of like creating a chatbot to guide them through on the first day. So it's like a messenger chatbot, and it's like, you know, always on, and it's cool. Yeah, great idea. And, but that's going to take a lot of effort and money. So we're going to put it in that box. And these two, however, is probably lower effort, can happen immediately. And then you can prototype on these two first instead of like spending money and months to build this thing. So it's about prioritizing what action points from all of that ideation you did from How Might We. And then, you know, distribute and utilize. And it's the power when you do it as a whole team, right? The entire team, from accounting to social media to product design team, everyone is looking at this user, and everyone is thinking, we work for this guy, you know, like we work for this person. So we want to make their life great. Suddenly the whole team is aligned, and there's no misalignment, and different teams works in silo. We are actually looking at that one customer journey as a whole, which is kind of like a powerful thing if you think about it. There's so many companies don't do that though. Like, yeah, I feel like it is a bit of a miss opportunity there. Like, they should be getting so excited to just look at what the user is about rather than what the company wants to do. Yeah, okay, cool. So your How Might We solution becomes the action plans, and then that's when you can start delegating things into different teams, and then action and prototype and measure. Speaking of measure and prototype. So prototyping, of course, I mean, this is a digital product. So it's kind of like, okay, you just paper sketch some ideas and maybe internal test it, storytell it a little bit, and then see if this is valid, and then you transfer it and to make it into some sort of like digital screen so that people can test it, user can test it, and you can decide what kind of fidelity. You don't have to, you know, spend months to make something that's completely beautiful. The faster the better at this point. And if you're a prototyping service, for example, let's say if you at the bank or something, and then when the customer walks into the door, they know where to go. So potentially your prototype could be, let's just print out a signage somewhere, or let's have a staff at the entrance, you know, to implement quick prototype ideas before it rolls out to everywhere to test if it's valid. Okay, so when you're doing testing, again, depending on what kind of testing that you're doing, but typical testing for digital product would be there's a researcher, someone that's monitoring the entire process. The researcher will have a testing plan and a list of questions and tasks that's prepared before the test. Someone that's recruited as users, and you have, you know, video recording or set it up. And this could be done online. The list of tasks, you can do it in Excel sheets or Google Sheets or something, and then just like making sure that you follow and you don't miss anything that's important. And these are the various of different type of testings that you could do. It's depending on if you are, right. So let's say remote and unmoderated, usually like a session recording. So you could potentially send them a link, a prototype link or something, but get them to record it and send you back the recording. So at that point, there is pros and cons for each one of these different categories of research. You need to consider what's the most natural environment for your user. So if the user testing for a shopping website feels most natural when they're at home, unmoderated, then trying to choose a method that suits that particular product and user the best. of course, sometimes if it's a shopping website or app or something, you really wanted to also walk the user through to make sure that you get all of the process down, then would be maybe remote but moderated, which we, video interview, and then you have a Zoom recording. Eye tracking, exactly. So like if it's A/B testing, eye tracking, these are all can be done unmoderated and remote. But if it's service design, if you're doing service design, there could be guerrilla testings or in-person observations, like shopping centers, banks, that kind of thing. Okay, so how many users should I test? The big question, but I have good news for you. You don't actually have to test 100 people. Because of course it takes a lot of time, but great news is that study has found if you interview about 5 users, often it reflects the pattern of approximately 82% of the entire user group. So that's kind of huge. So at about this point, we're at about 5, the new patterns start to become less and less, meaning if you, or like 6 users, let's say, sweet spot, at that point, if your product has satisfied 6 users, is most likely going to succeed. But if your product, if all of these 6 users has a different reaction, that it may mean that you need to get back to like just trying to figure out what their stopping points are or what the fall off points are and trying to fix the product and test again. Right, so how do you test? Again, this user testing topic is huge and I can talk about it for the whole day. It is actually a quite hideous process, but that's depending, of course, if you're doing usability to that testing, sort of video recording and how big the project is, but you want to make sure that you are documenting all of your insights properly so that you could reflect the insights into action points. Of course, your goal is to uncover the problem, to discover opportunities and learn the new behavior and preferences. And in saying that, I often find that video recording interviews are or like face-to-face interview. If you can be observing what the user's reaction are, it's often one of the best way to do interviews. If you're doing like a usability testing, for example. And then you want to document down what works, what didn't work, if there's any question or new ideas coming out from the testing. And I often document all of my testing results on Excel sheets, and I have it all sort of in a formula calculated. So then at the end of the testing, after all the implementation of the results, I have a percentage of how I measure success. So for example, 80% of the user can complete the test. It's a successful method, or 65% of the user says that they would actually sign up to this process, So you can actually come up with all of these different measures for your particular product. All in all, it's trying to avoid to get to this, right? There are way too many products. Like I said before, there's just too many companies. They want the users to understand the product, but refuse to understand the user. And this is typical reflection of what that looks like, actually. Okay, so lastly, the most important thing is sharing the story, sharing your insight. This is important because your stakeholder is waiting for that big moment, right? You have done all this work and you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to have to talk about why we did this. You want to make sure that you do this part right so that you can, encourage the entire team and whole company to be on board, to be like user advocates. So think about your audience. Who's going to be listening to you presenting these insights? Are they going to be managers, accountants, people from different backgrounds? They all have different motivations and pain points for this. Understand at this particular point when you're presenting, your audience are the users. Understand, be empathetic about why they're there to listen to your story, right? If they are skeptical about it at the start, Make sure that you cover those points. Make sure that you give them the right numbers. Make sure that you tell the stories from the user's point of view. So there's a couple of things that you can do. Okay, I would also, I would think that instead of going, okay, here's the user, and then here's Clara, this is what she needs. She's 32 years old. She uses this kind of like, I mean, how dull is that? Stop presenting Clara, be Clara, you know, walk in the room and then go, hey, I'm your user. I've been using your product for 30 years, 30 years. And here are my frustrations. And you start quoting Clara out in your presentation, and suddenly your storytelling becomes so much more powerful because you're not telling someone else's story and you're not giving them a report, but you're that person. And it's actually quite real and raw to listen to those like direct quotes. So I would say, you know, make sure that you are actually presenting your user to its full like reflection of the user, rather than just telling their story. And the best thing to do if you're not comfortable being the user, just play the video interviews of parts where during the testings or during the interview, this is what the user says. So all of this is about putting the stakeholders in their shoes. Like a movie, right? So when you're watching a movie, you feel for the characters, getting the stakeholders to attend user testing sessions. Okay, so one of these, this bank I've worked, you know, sort of went to their presentation, and what they did with the user testing methods is they set up the room. So it's all streamed with a video in there, and that video is actually streamed to a website. And so they encourage the entire company to tune in at that certain time during the interview, so that the company can actually hear what the interviewer's been asking the users and what do they say about the product. And that has completely turned how the CEOs think about user research, because the CEO actually tuned in. And then that next research session, the CEO actually helped drafting out the questions, etc., which is like quite amazing, right? So this is what you want to get to for your presentation. You want to make sure that you mention not just the users, but you understand the business value and the business inside, where the business goals what's the goals for the business, and understand what type of technology is the best for getting the business value to the user needs. So that's why we wanted to, you know, at those during the customer journey part, where we want to avoid going into solution mode, because if as soon as you go, okay, we'll just make a landing page, and then with all of these things, it's kind of like, but is that the best technology? You know, could we maybe have like a quick chatbot on Messenger, or could we maybe just do like a super easy email? Like there are so many different options for technologies. It's not, the app is not always answer. The landing page is not always answer. Think wide. And again, that is why you want to involve different stakeholders from different teams into these discussions. That is when you can really figure out what the opportunities are for the company. I mean, it's a bit vague when you look at it like this, but I often do this exact equation on Excel sheets, and I would like list down exactly what the user says, their quotes, and how the business is aligning to those, and what kind of product opportunities and technology that we could utilize. So from like the how might we solution ideation sessions, and then trying to align them together, and then presenting back. So then it's kind of like, okay, it's not just the user, you've actually thought about the business values in here. Okay, and then most of the time, if you're like consulting or helping a business, or for example, design sprinting or something, you could come up with different reporting methods from that research. So the company will be able to take the reports and or action points in order to implement, right? So if it's in-house or lean agile teams, you want to do it quickly, and you don't want to spend way too much time trying to make this report beautiful. It's about action points. So I normally will just put it down in Excel sheets, and I would, instead of Excel sheets for myself to document what the research is like. And then I would have a Word document where I have insights and discoveries for each part of the product as a summary and action points. And so everything's aligned back together. And everything is not hypothetical. It's all based on like the users and like the reflection of the business values, etc. Yeah, so you could potentially have even just a short email summary, quotes from the users, video, audio clippings, and trying to put them together. And just ask yourself, what's the smallest amount of work you can do to actually drive the actions to get to the next stage, and think, fast turnarounds. Now, formal reporting methods are usually quite a beautiful document, as you can see. And these are the different type of areas that you may want to include into your reports. Now, there are a lot of different research report examples here as a link you can click on the PDF once you get it. And often this is the type of reporting methods for agencies business when they're presenting to their clients. So it's kind of like, nicely presented. So it's agency versus in-house. Okay. So far, so good. Okay. We actually have quite a bit of time. So I want to show you guys something before I get into here. So this is like, there's a lot of Q&A. Fantastic. All right. So I want to show you, this is like a little client project that I've helped with a team to brainstorm things. So for example, we have done all of the interviews by video, etc., and we documented it down with all the quotes and findings. And then we themed all of the different findings into like challenges and pains, right? Maybe findings for depending on what kind of criteria that you need to find for that particular user. And then we have put it down into a journey map on how the user experience. And this is really done like super low fidelity. As you can see, it's mirror board, nothing fancy. It's literally just like Post-its. And you can define the main journey, touch points on the top, and then what they do. And as you can see, I put down a lot more criteria on the left-hand side than the simple version that you've seen in the presentation. So as I put down these repeated, because I've interviewed 5-6 users, right? And then some of these are repeated insights. Most of them are actually. And so from the repeated insights, I could then go, okay, this is what I do. I normally go, okay, cool. I put a number here. So then when I do insight on how my ways, I can refer back to at what point and why the insight was generated. And then the emotional roller coaster, I use emoji because it's kind of like, that just feels a little bit more like you're with them at that point. And then here's what I do with insights. These are the, how might we stuff, how might we ideas, if you will. So number 1, 2, these are like the numbers actually referred back to what the findings from the customer journey. So when the stakeholder question, why is that being put into the decision making, I would go, okay, well, if you can see on the customer journey, this is how they feel about it, and which is why I think it's worth it for us to discuss how do we improve that, right? So I do that kind of little insight opportunity thing, and then from there on, I would come up with lots of different how might we from those insights. And I would get the company to vote, to ideate this and vote on them. So this company, the entire company, everyone, including CEO to the dev guy, everybody is encouraged that they have 48 hours to put at least as many ideas as possible on each one of these how might we statements. And then everyone needs to vote 2 to 3 dots per how might we box using red dots, because I don't want to see red, blue, yellow, whatever, right? There is a reason behind it, because there's no point for me to think about different color means different things. It just needs to be the most obvious, so that you just use one red dot. And so that entire process saved down, it saved so much time. Imagine there is so much meeting times spent for every single company of going, how do we do this, right? And then the entire company sits in the meeting room and they probably discuss for 2-3 hours and there's no action point. But in this sort of like voting, how might we exercise, we actually get to so many more ideas with no influences from each other. And then eventually what I do is, of course, pick the most voted ideas, or like I would think about how these other ideas relate to this one potentially, and then ideate the process from there. Yeah. And yeah, so this is like a little like the messy mural board that we use to do our brainstorming for the products and content strategies and user flows. And then we prototype everything on Figma and then sync back to this part again. We sync back to another mural board where we can see the entire product, which looks like this. I'll show you. So all the screens, wireframes were done in Figma. And then we sync it back here, so that what I do here is I link every single flow together. So then you can see exactly how each button and each screen links to each other. So then this board becomes the discussion board for stakeholders. The stakeholders can come here, and also developers can come here, and this gives them the better idea of exactly how all the screens fits together. And of course, information architecture maps stuff. Okay, right, so sorry for the messy mirror board, but sometimes messy is where ideas starts. Don't be afraid to be messy. We don't want to be too organized when we're trying to get cool ideas out there, right? So baby steps, if you are trying to push for the design thinking methods so that you can understand your customer better, bite-sized research plans, trying to stick with low budget and quick turnarounds. I have this experience of a stakeholder where they were spending lots of time discussing what should go onto the main menu navigation bars and what icons should go with them. And I was like, okay, no more discussions. I'm just going to quickly do like a little survey. So it's basically just a type form survey of going, which icon goes with which menu, and sent that out to all of my social network. And overnight I had 100 replies, because it literally takes 2 minutes. So that's the thing. I want to mention that if you want to utilize your own network for quick bite-sized research like that, be kind. If you say it's 1 minute, it's 1 minute. Don't make it 5 minutes, because if you do it once, people are not going to trust you ever again. So like, you know, handle with care with bite-sized research plans, because those little internal, your social network are doing you a favor, right? So you want to be nice, empathy. All right. So, and then get the team on the same page. By start to encourage them to go, okay, how about if we just like select a couple of users to talk, let's talk to them next week and see how they feel about it. And sometimes you just need to maybe have like a small budget, let's say $30 for 15 minutes of their time, or $50 voucher for half an hour of their time, or something. And so that, but if you are paying them, make sure you give them the money first before you do the research. Why? Because you don't want them to think their answer is influenced, if whether or not they get paid is influenced by the answer. Pay them first and then sort the rest out. Tools, all you need is a whiteboard or Miro, like the one that I use, and start to refer every single business decision back to the user. Encourage the stakeholder to think that way, right? If the SEO doesn't work, or if the product description is that too complicated, is that too wordy, there needs to be a balance between all of these elements. And then trying to reflect research data back to business metrics, because that is the only way you could actually fully convince the entire company to be on board. If we start speaking emotional value to quantitative values. And it could be as easy as printing out the quotes from your users, right? I mean, instead of designing this amazing mural on the wall, you could just quickly print it out, like a quote from your customer service team or something, and then stick it on the wall. And then you just look at it, go, how do we make it better for this person? Instead of saying this software could do this and that and this, let the user motivate the whole team to think, how could this product help our users based on what they need? I mean, if you can't do an A4 page printout, then probably too lazy. Someone in the company needs to do it. And apply product thinking. It goes everywhere. Product design, service experience design, business design. I mean, I apply design thinking in tiniest little steps, and that makes huge difference. One of the best example is that last year I taught a first UX design course at GA, and it was a 1 week course. It was super intense, and I mean, even I felt intense. And then at the end of the 1 week, I was like, how about if we just change the timing a little bit? So instead of the presentation day at the end of the week, could we maybe move the presentation day to the week after, so that everyone can feel relaxed and they have room to move, right? And of course, GA was fantastic. They're like, yeah, of course, let's just try it in the next workshop. And bam, guess what? The next UX design course, like the quality of work skyrocket. Everyone is not stressed, and we got so much more delivered. And it was just a huge success. So small changes like that really costs nothing. It's about motivation, and it's about that courage to encourage that and push that out. Leaderships, organizational change, even business plans. Pitch that. And here are some tools. Yeah, you don't have to be a designer. You can use this tool to create your user persona online and print it out. Fantastic. Don't even need to spend money, right? It's cheap. We don't have to hire a fantastic designer to lay it out. Here are different tools that you could use at different stage of during the design thinking process. I mean, of course, this is like absolutely the iceberg of, there's so much different tools out there right now. I can't even, but I guess these are the most commonly used tools. Miro, I use Miro for everything actually. And I also use Notion. I don't know if you guys use Notion, but I use Notion to document my process and plan, because that's all real time and it's just much more user-friendly than Google Sheets. And I also use Dovetail for all of my user interviews to be like repositories that's at the same place. And these are the other usability testing tools. If you're testing a website or landing page or anything, you can use these tools. And all of this, it's kind of like do a design, create some clicking prototypes on the design, which is like draw a box on the button and then link to the next page. Super easy. And then upload it, and it creates a little link for you. And I've used Maze quite a lot, and it's kind of like it creates a little link. You send it to your network, And when users are interacting with your product, it actually creates a heat map of where they're clicking, where their cursor is going, and as well as a whole data set of success rates, dropout rates, time spent on the website, all of it. Like you don't even need to interview them. This is perfect for offsite, unmoderated testing. Other tools, there are way more than this. Heat maps, A/B testing, social media, conversations. I use Reddit to check out what people are talking about all the time. YouTube even. Yeah, so it's basically finding out how a lot of people solving the same problem. And you would find that the more unconventional research method you go to, the more creative ideas that you could generate, maybe, if I should say. If I read Reddit, sometimes I'll be like, oh, you know, some user, there's this like huge Reddit chain about how people travel and what kind of organization tool that they use. And I was like, I've never heard of any of this before. I mean, this is like great gold. These user feedbacks are absolutely natural. There's no, like, it's no force, it's motivated. Yeah, so here are some other resource books that you can read. Of course, they are all really classic. It's not about when they were published, it's about how good they are. Podcasts, there are way more than this as well. Please check into it, but most importantly, watch some documentaries. Who doesn't like that? Yes, The Loop I spoke about earlier. Design Disruptors, it's quite interesting as well. Objectify is actually a movie that I watched in 1999 and it completely changed the way I look at design. So I would highly recommend everyone watches it. This is not just about objects, it's about how designers think, why things are designed. Ever since I watched this, I never looked at any object the same way ever again. And other links that you could look further into in terms of design thinkings and tools. Finally, where to find me? Of course, I would love everyone to add me on LinkedIn, and then let's exchange idea. I post, thoughts and sharing insights that I learn from other design leaders in the world all the time. And I also mentor designers on ADP lists, which I love. It's actually one of my friends initiated this in Singapore. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best idea. And since then, there are, I mean, how many? It's 800 something mentors on ADP list right now. And they're all from like really well established companies. So, and this is absolutely free of cost. It's just the best thing ever happened in design industry. Free of cost, connecting designers with designers. And it's just basically about exchanging ideas. So feel free to book a call with me. And of course, I'm more than happy to chat to, you don't have to be a designer. If you have like a challenge in your company you want to talk about as well, more than happy to spend time to see if I can help. Yeah. And I have another UXD course coming in October, which is towards the end of October, I think. There are a lot of new updates to this one. So it's 10 weeks part-time, quite bite-sized, 2 hours Monday and Wednesdays for 10 weeks. So yeah, chat to GA. And thank you. I have to look through, we have 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna look through some of these Q&As. And thanks, Kay, for, yeah, okay, so I'm going to go from bottom up because I believe a lot of the questions asked at the earlier stage could potentially be already answered. So I'm going to go, yes, my course will be available for entire APAC, or I think it's remote, right? So, okay, it's going to ask this. Okay, you how could prototype organization change, e.g. new job, new structure? Oh yes, okay, so how to prototype that? It is quite a broad question, but remember I mentioned, Jaslyn, remember I mentioned about the HR challenge that one of my students was like, how do I how do I apply design thinking to change people's behavior or how they think about annual reviews? And I was like, okay, great, this is fantastic. You know, like, first of all, let's find out how people think about annual reviews. And then second thing, let's find out how might we. So maybe, as you know, you bring different people from different teams together and go, let's have a little fun exercise and do this, how might we? And then prototype. And it's literally quite a similar process you applied. And then just prototype. For example, maybe you can go, instead of a traditional PDF filling in questions, the process just too old and everyone feels dulled about it. How about we create a little fun website? Or how about we create a little fun, you know, type form kind of like process, because type form is kind of interactive and maybe that would make people like annual review again. I mean, yes, there are so much about organizational change, but it's always coming down to who the users, primary users, find out what they like, what they pain points are, and yeah, utilizing that same process. Is it possible to print out what's onto Mural, the very wide grain on what? Print it out. Yes, I believe if you on Mural, if you have a paid account, you can export those screens to high resolution screens, which will be a printout. Oh, someone's asking about the Netflix docu. Sorry, they are not Netflix actually. So I have links here for these documentaries links. And if you just want to quickly take a screenshot of this. But the Objectify is actually from 1999 and it's not on Netflix. You might have to do the dodgy way. You're not trying to download it somewhere. Okay, what else? Carl asked, any strong references for Mural for this kind of thing? Oh, they're the same thing. They do exactly the same thing. I just Mural and I just stick with it. This is the same thing. Tools doesn't matter. It's what you do with it. How do we facilitate this whole session? Start with the problem statement first. Carissa, right. No, we figure out what the users want first, and then the problem statement probably coming out from the user insights. Yeah. So what does it mean? Oh, I didn't know that I could actually answer live. Okay, do you know of any free website that we can use for simple customer journey? Yes, use Miro. They've already got template in it. You just go add a template, customer journey map, bam, and then fill it in. Super easy. Okay, I've got 5 more minutes. How do you identify and define business value from users' needs? Okay. Whoa, this is a big question as well. I mean, business value is only valuable when you are satisfying the user needs, really. So the business user needs comes first, and then what the business gets out from it, right? So, but I think it's always coming back to the vision of the product, of the business. So this is actually got to do with branding a lot. So the why this particular business is actually available at the first place. For example, GA is about education. We want to educate and make people feel like empowered. So all of these things, these value keywords, we want to align to what the solution the business is providing the user, and making sure that we ask the question, are these solutions providing the value that aligns with the brand? So it's kind of like we need to look at the whole business branding, etc. as a whole. So sometimes when I work with the client, and if their business doesn't have a solid brand, I would suggest them to go and just do a little bit of exercise on the branding part first. And you could also, utilize the design thinking methods to redesign a brand. And there is a lot of frameworks out there for finding out what the brand values are. And yeah, so it's about finding out the brand value, finding out the user needs and want, and then align them together. All right. Right, let me see what other questions there are. Guerrilla testing means, Eva, guerrilla testing means you just randomly ask strangers to do some sort of testing. Okay. I think I'm going to throw it back to Kate, and I'm going to trying to download all of these questions. And yes, please, let's connect, and I will answer most of these questions if I get on LinkedIn, so that I can answer you guys better. Is that cool? Thank you so much for your time. I love spending time with you.
Hey, Jacqueline, thank you so much for today. It was such an amazing presentation, and a big thank you for everyone that joined us virtually online today. If you could all just take a minute or two to fill out the feedback that I've posted in the chat, that would be a great deal. And we hope to see you next time. Thank you so much.